This podcast is made possible by the generosity of listeners and viewers like you. Kindly consider a contribution through Patreon or PayPal. Links are in the details box. Any amount is appreciated. And follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The handle, the Beirut Banyan. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And to stay updated with video releases, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. I'm Rani Shatar, and this is the Beirut Banyan.
I really think it's a good place for people to sort of structure this kind of protests or try to navigate what they want to ask for. It's some sort of manifesto kind of trying to come up with this particular thing, just to have a good implementation plan and go with it, not just go with the flow.
Do you sense that Clubhouse is the platform where people go to push the limit? And the reason I ask it this way is because the typical social media outlets that I use and that I depend on for information increasingly feel like echo chambers. It's everyone I agree with on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Even on the comments, sometimes you do see sort of opponents, if you will, sort of come and attack, but then they're attacked too by your supporters.
Exactly.
So it doesn't really bear much fruit in the conversation. But Clubhouse, the times I've entered, and I have to admit, I'm not a frequent user, but I do check it, I think, at least one time a day. It's very calm. It's almost the unusually civilized discourse where people are taking turns expressing how they feel. And maybe I'm not going to the right places. Maybe it is volatile in other channels or other rooms. But my experience with Clubhouse is that it's calming. And you can have a conversation with the other team. You can listen. And people are more comfortable maybe expressing. Does that resonate with you? And at least your interactions with Clubhouse? And not necessarily just Lebanon, but the entire region, the way the region is using the app.
Basically, the civilized part of this application, even if you tackle the terminologies they're using for their actions. For instance, you have leave quietly. So basically, they're really trying to teach us how to behave in some sort of way, which is actually really impressive, honestly, because we're this culture of a lot of people talking at the same time and, all of that. And it's really nice to see that we're trying to manage to be civilized again. And that's one aspect to it. And also the part where you have to raise your hand to speak for the moderator to let you in and all of that. I mean, this is a civilized way of having this kind of salon for talking and having a lot of opinion. And actually in China, before the application got banned, it was called some sort of enlightenment salon for them, for Chinese users, because a lot of people went to Clubhouse application to educate themselves, because it was the only place where it's not a censored application, but obviously it got censored after that, and actually they blocked it. So it is a place where people get educated, people learn to, somehow break their ideological bubbles and try to get out of their routine and taboo topics. That's why you see a lot of Saudi women, they're trying to talk about women without hijab, for instance, or all of that, or the sex life, or whatever, all of that. So basically, it's really some sort of free space to a certain extent, where people are really, really trying to just invest in their knowledge, at the core basic level. Of course, there are an entertainment level to it, and the other side to it. But for most of people who are using it currently, it's a really place where they can get educated, or just by listening to other people's opinion. And I think this is what's really helping now, because I mean, especially with the timing, with the pandemic, and because a lot, we had this problem of lack of socializing, and somehow Clubhouse made us have excess socializing.
There's a socialization because of COVID. There's a void that we all need to we just need to interact with people, and the timing couldn't be better. That this, if I'm not mistaken, Clubhouse was launched in early 2020, but it didn't really catch on until last few months. But so it's been really the COVID era. So it fills that void. And I agree with you that there's I wouldn't go as far as maybe using the word education, but let's go there. Let's say that this is an education tool. From your side, why do you sense that there's more, or no, I'll say differently. Why is there less fake news or fake narrative or fake or even misinformation on Clubhouse so far than other places? And the reason I'm asking it this way is that every room that I've entered in Clubhouse, I don't sense that there's a push to get clicks. There's no clickbait. There's no trending topic that is more abusive than sort of healthy. It almost seems like you have to make the effort to go to the topic that resonates with you the most, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a heated sort of typical fighting, violent sort of debate style that we're used to, whether it's on the news, traditional news, these sort of horrible panel discussions where people shout at each other, or for that matter on social media, where you wake up in the morning, if you check Twitter, you can get a migraine from all the toxicity there. I don't sense that in Clubhouse. So is there something that sort of allows a healthier conversation there? And I'll add to that, I noticed that there's a verification process that's unusual as well, that you cannot just simply, it's hard to fake your identity. You're kind of pushed. I don't know if this is for data collection or maybe marketing reasons, probably, but that you have to be invited. And add to that, there's a push to have your social media platforms recognized. And I think there's an encouragement, if not an implicit assumption, that you're using your real name, that you can't sort of just make up your name, or if you can, it's harder to do it on Clubhouse. I'm asking many things here, but I'm just trying to get to why it's working.
I think it's working because a lot of aspects to it. Basically, because it's audio. So basically, I can be working, I can be playing with my pet, and still trying to get in a room and talk and have my opinion out there about something very serious. And people will actually listen because they're not going to be, like taken away by the details of the pictures or visuals that I might be presenting. So people will be focusing on just what I'm saying, and which is really important because that will give me the space to talk even more and be more confident with what I'm saying. And because I know that people who are in this room will have the same, I'm not going to say that they want to hear the same thing that I would want to say, but at least they want to talk about the same topic. So I know that I am welcomed here, and I will be talking about this, and whoever will not be, on the same side or same line or doesn't want to hear me out can just leave quietly. So basically, I think that's a very, very good aspect to it because people really feel comfortable talking, and they just want to share everything that they would be maybe shy or afraid to do that in public, or maybe with their looks showing. So basically, I think this is maybe more of the psychological aspect to it.
So that it's our own voices, and that's why we're reluctant to sort of go further than we would in other areas, because it's our
I think of it like the voice program. So basically, when someone, you can't see the person, you're just going to turn around if you like their voices. I'm not saying that it's the same with the voices, but I'm saying with the content itself that's being presented by the speaker. So I like to think of it this way. I like the similarity because it really shows that people can really be judgmental when they see the person. So maybe if they can only hear what they're saying, all of that, it will be more spontaneous, and they could actually accept the other's ideas.
There's something about, I'll just interrupt for a moment. Sorry about this. There's something about having to take turns. That's very attractive. That it's not, you have to sort of wave your hand and to have the host invite you into the conversation. I don't know if that's the best way of doing it, but it seems to work so far. That you can't just come in and shout. And I sense that,
Exactly.
yeah, Twitter, even though you're not shouting, you're just sort of, you're tweeting, but it's a free for all, and it kind of gets messy on the way. But Clubhouse seems to have a structure that works. Sort of, everyone can speak, but you have to wait and listen. So the patience is built in. But sorry, I was interrupting you. I wanted to see if that resonated with you as well.
Exactly. And especially that you need to wait for your turn. So basically, you need to be listening to other people, their content, their opinion, what they have to say. Maybe you can be convinced with their points, and maybe not. But it would teach you to listen to others. And I think that's a really, really important thing to do now, because nowadays we're just, the mass thought, mass implementation of our own unique ideas, and we cannot accept someone else's ideas. This somehow teaches us to, we need to listen, we need to see, maybe we can change our minds, maybe we can change someone else's mind, and in a civilized manner, not in a way that we are, trying to attack this person or whatsoever. So it's a very peaceful way. And I think this cue kind of, waiting for your turn to speak and all of that, it's a really nice feeling, because you get really excited and you just want to, focus on your content. It gives you even more time to focus on what you want to say. And you'll be saying whatever you want to say clearly and peacefully and with no interruption.
There's something that you wrote in the piece that sort of hit me. It hit home. And I'll quote you to you. The rise of Clubhouse, particularly during the pandemic, reflects a cultural willingness for verbal communication and perhaps a growing comfort with the type of conversation that has become popular on podcasts. I'll say this up front. It's the reason I know you from my podcast. I think it's the reason why I know most journalists in Beirut. A few not from the podcast, but the majority, overwhelming majority from the podcast. And there's many podcasts today, not just in, the world over, but Lebanon, the scene is sort of, it's healthy. And I say this in jest, but it almost feels sometimes like everyone has a podcast. Or maybe sometimes the word is used in a way that everyone wants to share their voice, and they can. And it's almost, it's not expensive. It's not expensive to host a podcast. It does cost some money, but it's not a burden. It's not a financial burden. Clubhouse is free. You just need your phone. You need to join, get invited, set up a room, and in a way you have your own outlet. Maybe it's not old. So maybe the terrain is still sort of, people are learning as they go. Podcast, there's infrastructure, there's hosts, there's hosting, there's platforms, and there are plenty. But I was surprised to learn that Spotify may be even doing something similar, that they may be opening up to live podcasts, which I don't know then what's the difference between a live podcast and a Clubhouse room. It almost seems like the same thing. I'm curious from your side. You're a journalist. You're focused on Lebanon. You work in you work for well-established platforms, media, online magazines. Why are you turning to me for information? I know the lure of joining a Clubhouse room, but why would a journalist be cued in to a podcast?
I really believe that, for instance, a lot of journalists are tuning into Clubhouse to listen to people. And what are they trying to say? We're always saying what politicians are trying to say. We're always showing the strategy of the government, whatever. How is this reacting how are people reacting in the street? But a lot of times we miss the people's opinion. This is the core of journalism, because I really believe this is what drives us to actually do what we have to do. This is, for instance, people may have a lot of opinion or maybe ideas, but they never have the time or the effort or the means to go on the streets and portray them. So I really think that tuning into a free application and a lot of people, which means that a lot of people are using it. So basically, you're going to hear a lot of people from different cultures, from different parts of this country, and you can still hear something that's genuine because they don't need to be, sugarcoating whatever they're going to say, or they're not going to feel shy, or they're just saying whatever they want to say because this is their own opinion. And I really feel like this is really a very, very good place to get a lot of insights of how people are feeling, how people are seeing things, and whether they have a certain plan that they want to go for. What is it exactly that people are concerned about? And I think for me personally, this is exactly how I like to see what I want to cover for my next topics. For instance, when I see someone that's like people when they're really concerned about let's say privacy issues for Clubhouse or any other application, that really drives me to do the research because this is my job. Like I feel like I can do the research to go for experts and their inputs and all of that and put that all together in one piece and give them out to people. It's like an answer. Of course, I try my best to do that, but I like to listen to people. I like to I always tell you that I like to take the cab, take the service, and just listen to people what they're trying to say because I can learn a lot and I can know a lot of what people they genuinely want to put out there.
So insights. So the conversations our Clubhouse may even be steering the conversation away from Clubhouse. That you're actually gaining insight, and that's the next story. That's really interesting.
Exactly.
And I never thought of it this way as not replacing, but adding to you going on the street to talk to people. And during COVID, it's just impossible to do it. So you have to go to Clubhouse. I didn't think of that. That's the source of material.
Exactly. And a lot of people are saying the conversation, even if it has a kind of title that says politics, it can go from politics to, mundane habits or, mundane issues that they're facing. So it's really a heavy, heavy place for a conversation. And people can learn a lot, even if they're not journalists. They can learn a lot because they can just hear the other side of the story, the other side of the world. And I just wanted to also comment about the fake news. It's not really, you can't really feel the fake news world or era in Clubhouse because there's nothing that's being screenshotted and shared, and a lot of people are sharing without knowing the context or background. So, for instance, I can know a fake news from a traditional media outlet and share it on Clubhouse, but someone will answer me back and say, no, that's not true because this and that, and try to put my story into perspective. So I think because a lot of people are trying to listen rather than just jump into conclusions.
It almost seems like it's the evolution of what everyone was afraid of, that fake news was dominating social media, but now you have the capability of vetting enough on something like Clubhouse. And that I think in my experience, it's actually not so easy to use, which I think makes it better. You have to actually make an effort to search what you're looking for. And in a way, people use different platforms to advertise that they're hosting something on Clubhouse. So it doesn't really feel like a toxic relationship with the user. I never get sick of Clubhouse, or I don't feel emotional. Actually, rather, I'm maybe I will adopt the word education. I do feel like I learn when I enter.
I mean, it's some sort of a la carte kind of using like the application, because you choose what you want, what you feel like listening to or talking about.
Right.
So it's really selective up to your mood or your whatever interest, basically.
Clubhouse, at least it explains its policy. It's a bit vague. It says it does not permanently store the recording. If I understood it right, it's that they're making sure there's no abuse, that there's no harassment, there's no legal problems there. But the fact is, and you said it, you can't just
trespass.
You can't trespass, or if you are doing that, it's not easy to do it. You have to actually use a third-party app or something that makes it not convenient. So the desire is not there, or the desire may be there, but it's not easy to do it. But then I'm going to sort of go into the privacy territory. It increasingly feels like this could be too good to be real, too good to be true, that it's not necessarily a safe space, so to speak, to voice your concerns. And I think that's really the gist of the article. And I'll take liberty here in quoting you to you again. The kindling of a sense of connection through the intimacy of voice and improvised conversation ultimately comes at a price. The app is under scrutiny for privacy breaches, unmoderated offensive and aggressive language, as well as ambiguity regarding data storage. And this is perhaps going to our part of the world. Authorities in different countries in our region are reportedly blocking or throttling Clubhouse as more people practice free expression on the platform. So there's a double-edged sword there. That
Exactly.
we may not feel safe enough using Clubhouse for our own reasons that are not state level. And then you have states that are concerned as well that the population is speaking too much. So in that terrain, is Lebanon in a way exempt from that problem because we have a dysfunctional state and a very sort of angry society that's sort of, it's not our concern so much as it may be in a place like Saudi Arabia or Iran or anywhere in the Gulf or perhaps even Jordan right now. Prince Hamza, King Hussein, and now they're
The
shutting down
drama.
the drama there. Is it more of a concern in those countries than in Lebanon, where there still is enough sort of debate, with or without Clubhouse?
Honestly, I think it's an equal risk to all of these states because somehow if someone is, against a certain political party and said something about this political party. So let's say someone else is with this political party and they just, they can record from another phone, they can record your voice and they can also like show your name. They can have it recorded as a video. So
Right.
there's still a risk imposed. And that's why we always urge people to not share everything so openly unless they know a lot of people who are in the room. And, just always be careful because you never know who's recording or who's taking a video of the conversation in the room, which is why the risk is equally imposed on all the countries. For instance, I was telling you that China had
Yes.
Clubhouse, but they banned it again.
Mhm.
So now activists and whoever raised their voices, they're really concerned because they don't know if authorities are going to pull back, all the rooms and the recordings and all of that. And they're just scared for their lives because they thought that it's a really, enlightenment for politics, for everything that they wanted to talk about their human rights abuses and all of that. And they're really scared now because if the authorities somehow spot these talks or rooms, they will be in like a huge trouble. So I think it's imposed on everyone, and especially also in the Arab countries, like aside from Lebanon, you have Amman, and Saudi Arabia. Again, they don't have a certain space and a platform to have this liberty, and this is always like impossible for them. And Clubhouse was the only space for them to talk openly about whether the government, the politics in the country, or the reforms that they want to have in this country. They never had space for it. Topics in Saudi Arabia and these countries, oppressed countries, are stories about politics, which means that they really need a space for that. They really need a place to amplify their voices, but they're still scared.
It's going towards the earlier part of the piece, and you say it up front. Participants voiced their opinions about the Gulf's normalization of Israeli ties, racism, and transgender rights. And I can't think of any, the aggressive attitude towards even WhatsApp, let alone Skype at times is banned. But that seems like very old technology now, or trying to censor Facebook or whatever. The capabilities are, there's always a war, if you will, on that kind of expression. But I've entered those rooms, and you have Saudis talking about issues that I never imagined possible in the Saudi Arabian context. And then there's the story of VPNs. And I don't know if this was your article. It may have been your article, where the UAE is trying to throttle the internet, and nobody notices because everyone's using a VPN. So is that sort
Exactly.
of is it a fait accompli that once you have this out there, people will just they'll find ways to use it, and there's no way of really cracking down on an app like Clubhouse, even in the most oppressive state. It's just too difficult to completely shut down the conversation today.
Actually, a lot of countries have succeeded in shutting out the conversations completely, and that's very unfortunate. But a lot of people are always trying to find an alternative, and that's the like hopeful place to look at it. So basically, China, when they had this opportunity, they saw it as something that's amazing, and that's why they used it heavily at the time when it was still not banned. Uh, Saudi Arabia is the best example for that. Although they might be scared, but it was still like some sort of like shining light for them to have a space to talk openly. A lot of authorities have the means to actually shut these applications and try not to have any applications for people to have these talks and all of that. But people are still going to try and have an alternative because this is what social media has taught us in a way or another. This could be a good thing and a bad thing, but a lot of people are just trying to find an alternative, and that's why we always reach out for new applications, try to learn about them, and try to see if, if we can use them with VPN or if we can use them safely or not. So I think that's our urge and a lot of people's concern.
I'll say this from my side. I think it's the first time I've actually had the opportunity to address this. I'm glad the Clubhouse debate is out there. And the reason I say this is for maybe selfish reasons, but also in principle, because it matters to me. This is a great way of debunking everyone's concern. There's like, your episode's too long. Keep it at 5 minutes. Keep it at 20 minutes. Keep it on Instagram. In other words, don't let the conversation flow. Limit it to the shortest attention span. And I refuse to do that. And podcasts implicitly they're designed for the long form. They're not designed for somebody to just sort of have a scatterbrain attitude to information. The whole attraction, the whole reason this thing exists is to allow something like this to happen. You can flush out one topic and there's no rush, there's no interruption. For that matter, there's nothing to stop us. We could probably go as long as we pleased. So Clubhouse, the rooms, these conversations last hours and people come in and out. And there's there may be a defined time, but the last time I was on Clubhouse, 2 hours in, I was still listening to the same. The conversation was being debated at a healthy pace, and I could have listened for hours longer. And I think there's a real demand for this type of information and exchange, that people are not interested any longer in that kind of escalating entertainment style boxing scenes that we're too used to. This may be winning over time. And when I say that to you, does that sound too naive and romantic?
I completely agree. I also believe that. I'm sorry. Do you want to say something?
Well, no, I wanted to say that in my short lifetime, in my short span with podcasting, it's been several years only. I've seen many podcasts emerging on the Lebanese scene, and there was at least one or two maybe before I started that were well established, but it's catching on. It's catching on, and I think it is working. I think there's an audience there, and it helps maybe that just the internet won. You don't have to wait for something at 8 p.m. now to listen to a 30-minute shouting match. You can tune in at your convenience. And at least for podcasts, it's always out there. Clubhouse, it's not. You have to join the room and then it doesn't stay. But when it comes to podcasting, it's permanent. This conversation will live forever, as long as I'm paying for my hosting service fee. But I think there's something there, and it wins long term. But I'm sorry, I was interrupting you. Please.
No. I completely agree. I think there's again two aspects to that. People are really longing or loving spontaneous and more something that doesn't need a lot of effort, because we can spot efforts when we see it now. So basically, maybe Clubhouse conversations are really they're not really studied or like there isn't a sort of effort put into them. They're very spontaneous, well, to a certain extent at least, and they're very, like whoever wants to talk can raise their hands, they can talk. And the thing is that there are a lot of speakers. So basically, people who go for podcasts, I go for a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I love doing that because I feel like whenever you choose to listen to a certain podcast and to give it your time and to just focus on its content, it's because you trust the presenter. So you give him your trust because you want to give this time and listen to what he has to say, and because you trust his choice of interviewees. So basically, this is like a trust, it's transactional kind of effort between the person who's listening and the person who is presenting the podcast. While on Clubhouse, it's just like, if I didn't like what they're saying, I can just leave quietly, and that would be it. I can go for another room or whatever. And so basically, I think that's it. People can have a bit of both, like sometimes you need, some fresh content from a lot of people. You want to listen to people discussing their opposing points of view. And sometimes you just want to listen to one person who is maybe interviewing another person. Like, you have a certain limited kind of people you're listening to. Not a lot of people are just trying to, and a lot of people actually like this formula, like, a presenter and someone asking and someone asking and someone answering. It's like, and it's a choice.
For me, the ability of seeing statistics, I'm always happy when I see that the audio listeners, the listenership, is in the thousands per episode. So, I mean, the total number is actually quite large. So there's a huge audio listenership that's attracted to the audio format, and I refuse to let go of the audio. I mean, the podcast is not a podcast unless you have an audio platform,
Right.
and you have a host which lets you spread it through different channels. So I insist on that, and that's honestly that's where my audience is. I'm not too concerned when the video numbers are fairly low compared to the audio. I used to believe it's just me, I'm too ugly for video. But now I know that it's not that. It's that podcasts pull in the audio listener. And there's an intimacy there. And your article, in a way, expresses that the intimacy is important. Is anonymity the problem with the usual format? That we know most of the users on Twitter, but we don't know all of them. And we don't know enough about them. And that, in a way, allows us to hide and say things that we wouldn't say otherwise, or share things that we wouldn't share if we actually had that level of intimacy. Is that the recipe? Is that the magic, if you will, about this format, and particularly in Clubhouse, that it's calming. It reminds me of the radio that I used to listen to as a child. That's gone. Nobody, I mean, I don't know anyone that sort of has a radio at home where they listen to.
I can so relate.
Yeah. It's that level of there's no one. It's soothing. And is that why it works?
I think it's also the attention span, because a lot of people might be looking into something and just, look at the details, at the background, at the wall. It's something really, really that's our attention span is an issue. Apart from that particular issue, I think that a lot of people are actually also going for something that they can listen to and multitask. For instance, I can be working and still listening to a podcast. And that's convenient to me because I can do a lot of things and still get to listen to you, for instance, or us. So basically, I think it's convenient. It's part of like how we deal with our attention span. And because it's selective, again, people are trying to move away from the traditional media in terms of televised media, not necessarily something that they can read. But they just want something that they can listen, that they can digest and take all the information without any interpretation of the person's looks or the background or all of that.
Right.
So basically, they just want this raw information that the host can give you. And I think that's why people are loving this new culture. And especially that you can listen to back in time when they wanted to announce war, they used to do it through radios because it can reach a lot of people and people can actually consume the news and digest it and have it properly informed, and they can be properly informed by it.
But you said the word independent a few times, and that is really the definition of independent media, where there's no sponsorship. I don't know any podcast in the Lebanese scene, at least, where you have a company or a big sponsor pushing an agenda. It's actually citizens who want to share
exactly. It's a fair discussion because I want to put out what I want to say, and maybe a politician would be in the room and just try to debate with me, and I'll be welcoming that because of course to a certain extent, but I would be putting out my opinion, and he could be saying something back, and a lot of people can back me or not back me, but at least we can have some sort of conversation that's civilized and that we could reach a point with it.
But let's sort of dissect them on an amateur level without scientific data. Let's sort of brainstorm here. At least when it comes to Instagram, Megaphone, Daraj Media seem to be winning in terms of independent platforms that can use Instagram effectively. Add to that, you have unusual people that are emerging. Some are historians, some are political scientists, some are political psychologists, and they resonate. They're attractive. The way they share their information seems to work. I turn to them regularly on Instagram. So I actually use Instagram for information, and I find it very appealing. Twitter, you have sort of independent journalists that seem to flourish on Twitter. And in a way, their careers begin sometimes on Twitter, and sometimes they work for bigger outlets, sometimes they don't. But Twitter has a sort of a healthy environment for independent voices, independent journalists. Notice I'm excluding Facebook, but that's honestly because I think Facebook is used less and less by the younger generation. Yeah. But I'll just say Instagram and Facebook as one sort of entity. You have audio platforms. Anyone with a smartphone can listen to them on a multiple ways of doing it, multitude of channels. Now you have Clubhouse, an app designed for, at least for now, the iPhone user, but it'll eventually open up to Android. Nowhere in the conversation is LBC, MTV, Al Jadid. It's not even there. And I'm going to ask you this, and you tell me as much as you can, or as much as you'd like. Is it a sense of that the news that we were used to was just too elitist? There was a disconnect between news, the way we understood it, the way we interacted with it, and the average person who was not perhaps getting what they wanted from it. And this is sort of, in a way, just correcting that you don't have much elitism when it comes to this platform or these platforms. On the contrary, it seems like it's a real bottom-up, real grassroots-like thing that took off. Without sounding too, in a way, cheesy here, but just trying to understand what the appeal is at the end of the day, and why this seems to be where not just you, but everyone I know is turning to these outlets or these platforms to get information. I don't know anyone who watches TV for information today. I simply don't know, with the rare exception of one Albert Constantin, who seems to be actually turning to these platforms to get voices. So it's almost turning to the independent voices that are on social media or on Clubhouse and putting them on TV. So it almost seems like he's in a way bridging it. But as much as you can say about that.
I agree with you on Albert, because he really tries to select experts. And nowadays we need experts, not just people who have opinion and randomly say them out loud. So I really think he's doing a great job with that. And I believe that people are turning away from the TV, and like specifically in Lebanon, because we know that certain, or basically the monopoly we have over politicized news outlets that are televised, basically they're they have a certain line. They have a certain political line that we sort of we've been we've normalized it somehow to a certain extent up until we had an alternative that people who have an opposing kind of journey or political agenda, or they're just people like us, like you and me, because people are just getting used to this spontaneous kind of approach, and they just want that even more, because that's the real conversation. That's what people really want to hear. They want to hear experts who are not trying to fulfill a certain political agenda. They just want to hear experts and listen to statistics and have data that are concrete, nothing that's abstract or nothing that's opinionated. And I think that the more people got used to this new culture or new habit, the more they are asking for it. And that's why a lot of people are no longer watching these political shows that are on the traditional news media, because they are not, they can't accept this anymore. Once you've seen an alternative that's really good and that's really feeding your interest and knowledge, we will no longer settle for something that's only set for a certain political agenda.
But when you say the word experts, you as a journalist, are you finding these experts in these platforms? And just the way you would want to interview somebody, or you want to sort of get information, are you using what sort of the same terrain, or do you still go to the older ways of accessing? Because I'm curious how you would do it, since you're using that word, and it's important that we have so many experts, but I don't really find them. I don't see them that much on TV. I see them mostly on these platforms. So how do you do it?
What I try to do is a lot of digging into social media, because you can somehow put a keyword or something that's very targeted towards what you really want to find, and then you'll find a bunch of names, whether it's on LinkedIn maybe, or Twitter, or all of these platforms, and then you can some sort of go into their history. You can know exactly what they've done, and it makes you feel more comfortable if you want to go and have their own input. I don't know if like people who get their guests through for televised talks would take this extra mile, only because I think that they're looking for experts that also feed into a certain political agenda. So they're not looking into someone's historical background in terms of their expertise level.
I go there myself. I'm actually using all these platforms all the time. I find myself as a quote podcaster, if that's the right word, I guess it is, that I'm always plugged into the audio world. All my information comes from independent sources, with the occasion of someone like you who works in a way, a more traditional field. You do write long form articles. I read your pieces. I read your piece about Clubhouse. But that said, I'm increasingly going to these platforms rather than traditional media. But I do think at the end of the day, both are important. I don't think one can fully take over the other. I think there has to be a give and take, because without the article pieces that someone like you produces, it can't just be endless conversations. There has to be fact, and there has to be structured in a way that's digestible. So I think both are important. But one thing is clear: independent media took off, and it's here to stay. And it's, in a way, it has captured the mind of many. I think it has startled some of the old guard, and in a way, I think many are impressed for the right reasons. I had a conversation with Muwaffa Harib, and the end of the conversation was only about independent media and why it's working. And he's a big fan of the independent media's role in the debate, and that there is a winning component there, that they are winning for the right reasons. But he's also a traditional reporter, and he works at the Daily Star. He at least once a week publishes an article at the Daily Star. He still advises MTV. So there is that as well. But it's almost like a balancing act. Both of us listened to a podcast episode by Saturday. So Mu'in Jaber, his podcast partner, Medea, and then Mu'in's father, Ali Jaber, who helped set up Future TV, who's now in Dubai with NBC. I think he's the dean of a communication school as well.
Amazing.
But it's fascinating that you have a well-established traditional media figure and his son, who's fully into the independent media world, heavy on Instagram, has his own podcast as well. So I think this is almost like it's turning the page, but it's not that one is completely going to take over the other. I think both are here to stay.
The traditional media set the stage for new news outlets. So basically, we took a lot of ideas maybe from that fundamental place where everything started and all the media started. A lot of people tuned in to watch actually political news and political shows. So a lot of really, really, really fundamental ethics were taken from that place. Were taken from that place, and thus, implemented in this new, spontaneous and more independent kind of approach.
I'll wrap it up by saying something which is very unusual for me to express on the podcast. I'm glad that our online friendship matured fairly quickly from, I think it was, maybe it started on Facebook, perhaps.
Sure.
It went to Instagram naturally. And then it went to Twitter, more appropriate given what you do and what I do. And then it sort of went from there into both of us sort of attending Clubhouse conversations. And this is almost like it can't go further. You're now a guest on the podcast. So that, I think we reached the top of our online friendship. And I'm privileged in many ways to know you as a friend in real life. And I think that still matters more than all this online stuff. So the physical component, the real friendship, I think still matters. It'll always beat this virtual dance. So I'm fortunate to consider you a friend. And I've learned a lot from your pieces. And I look forward to what you're doing in various outlets. I know there's more to come. Maybe I can't share that yet. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe you'll share it your own way later. I'll leave it there. There's big stuff happening, and I'm excited for what you're doing. And I look forward to your pieces, and perhaps we'll do another episode when the topics change over time.
I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you,
Thank
Tala.
you, Ronnie.
Thanks for listening and watching. And a friendly reminder to support this podcast by contributing through Patreon or PayPal. All links are in the details box. Until next time, I'm Rani Shatah, and this is the Beirut Banyan.